This is going to be a quick overview of IXL because I know we still have some questions and some teachers who use it just part of the way, but I want to make sure you know every component to IXL before entering the next school year. The first question that always comes up on our top 10 most asked questions is by far how to create a roster, because if you will look, I just logged in and I don't see the word roster anywhere because they don't make it in a smart spot for you to see it, in my opinion. So if you look where it says welcome Brianne Cox, I'm going to click on that and there's that word roster. So I'm going to click on the roster here. Well, I already made a roster in a video I made before, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can add students to your current roster, how you can delete them. They make it super, super easy and user-friendly for the teacher to add the students in directly. I know a lot of times Debbie and I don't get the new kids added as quickly as you need them, but if you have their ID number, you can add them in IXL whenever you want to, as long as they're not already in there. So if I wanted to delete students, you just hit the red X. If you want to add students, you just hit the add button. You can put their last name. If they're already in the system, when you start to type them, their name's going to appear below. I'll show you what it looks like. So I started to type sides and it popped up for Addie. So it's kind of reads your text as you're going. So if they're already in the system, they'll pop up and then you know somebody's already added them and you can just click on them and then they're added to your class. If they're not, you can keep adding them. You can select the grade that they're in, and whatever their student ID is, please do their password as the same thing. We are trying really, really hard to do all the passwords as their student IDs and everything that we can. And you just click save. So now that you have this roster, you have a couple of options up here. You can print them. If they're younger, you can print student username and password cards. You can print a list. I think even if they're older, this is great to have because especially our new kids or our kids that moved in who don't know their ID number, this is just another way for you to have a list so you're not having to get on the computer and look it up every time. You can also do letters to parents because they can access IXL at home. I know majority of them probably won't, but for the ones who want to get better and who are those type of learners that will work at home, this can allow you to send information to parents home about that as well. Once you have their roster established, let's start by looking at the Learning tab. I liked the Learning tab because before I assigned anything, I wanted to know myself what it looked like. So you can go through literally any skill. If they are a fourth grader, they are going to have access to the skills from pre-K through, I think it goes all the way up to pre-cal, calculus, algebra 2. They have access to all of them. So if you have a student that needs to work above grade level, you can. If you have a student that needs to work below grade level, they can in IXL, and that's kind of why it's different than any other program that we've used before. The Learning tab is pretty self-explanatory. It just shows you all the skills that they can test the student on. Analytics. This is where you're going to get your data from once they have actually practiced in IXL. IXL allows you to look at this data in every possible way you could ever imagine. You can look at the diagnostics if they've taken a diagnostics test. This kind of gives you the overview of how they did. My favorite was this trouble spot, and I'll show you. So I'm going to look at Austin, and it's going to show me that he had trouble with graph solutions to one-step inequalities It tells me what his SMART score was. So they work until they get to 100%, and then they could go on to the next. Then it shows that they've completed that group of questioning. But it's telling me that he missed 5 questions about this item. So this tells me that this needs to be a reteachable moment for that student. I loved the trouble spot more than I loved anything else. If you just want a student overview, you're going to click on your student tab. It's going to tell you an overview of all your kids. Now you can break it down. It breaks down below. So it's going to show me practiced in the last 19 days, or practiced 19 days ago for Austin, what he was working on. But this is really just an overview of all your kids. You can narrow it down to look at a specific student, but this doesn't allow you to zero down in on skills as much. So it's going to tell me this is how many questions he's answered, how long he's been in it, and how many skills he's mastered. If you want to just look at it from the skills level, so say you wanted to know how all your students did on one skill. Obviously, I have one student in there right now for this group. So it's going to say one student practiced it. They have 84 questions, and this is how much time they spent. This was what I used to look at if I was kind of looking for trends of where we had trouble. You know, if kids spend more time in it, that probably means they're struggling in it. If they don't get as much questions answered and they've spent a whole lot of time, then that's something you would want to look back at to say, okay, what are we doing here and how can we fix it? Scores is probably what you will use the most. It gives you the option to do it in a grid, a student score chart, or a skill score chart. And I'm just going to click on scores in general. Without scrolling down and showing you any of their scores, you would select up here. Actually, I can pick 7th grade because he's my only 7th grader. I'm going to pick 7th grade math, all students, because I only have one kid who was in 7th grade math last year, and he is my child. So then when you scroll down, it's going to show you, okay, so Austin on compare and order integers got 100 for his SMART score. He did 28 questions in 4 minutes. So that tells me he doesn't have a whole lot of trouble with that. Same thing. So you can scan on top of these scores to see, so this took him a little bit more time, obviously, because he's having to add, subtract, multiply, or divide decimals. But you can scan on top of their scores and get a little bit of detail about them. You can get it in, this is your score grid. This is your student score chart. So it's going to show you kind of everything that we just did, where you were highlighting over it. It's going to have how many questions answered, time spent, and last practiced. I'm telling you, there's a million different ways you can look at it. Skill score chart. So this, again, well, perfect. I'm glad I showed you that one. Addie had a SMART score of 100. She had 14 questions answered. She spent a minute, so that must have been pretty easy, on November 13th. So there is no, I could show you all these million different ways, but you're going to have to get in there and see what makes the most sense for you. For us math-minded people, the score on a grid where you can really break down to see how many questions they've answered and time spent, to me, is the most effective, but that might not be the choice that you would make. When you click on questions, once you've figured out a skill that they're struggling with, this is the time to start looking at those questions. And I'm narrowing it down to ones they've worked on. Select a skill and student above to view the student report. So this is the time, and I'm going to talk quick because I'm kind of running out of time here. Make sure I pick the right one this time. This is a time where you can see the actual questions he had in front of him. So show missed questions only, hide correct answers. This is where you can break it down and see exactly the questions that he had. I think that's super important because I knew I was going to get cut off. I always talk too long. Okay, so back to what I was telling you. This is where you can see the exact questions that were put in front of them. A lot of programs will tell you the skill they struggle with, but they won't show you the exact question they had. Here's another advantage of IXL. They are going to show you the exact question that was put in front of him and how he answered it. And so you can try to figure out possibly what his brain was thinking and how you could help him for the future. You have two other options at the end. You have progress. Now, this is huge to kind of see how they're progressing over time. I'll scroll down so you can see. It's telling me how many he answered, how many he's practiced, how many he's proficient in, and how many he's mastered in. Does this sound familiar? Yes. So they stacked this based off of how we do our state testing. So you can see the types of questions he has absolutely no trouble with, and then the questions that are that mid-level, and then the questions that are lower and he's just practiced. Over time, once they've had more in there, he doesn't have any data on the diagnostics growth. If you diagnostics test them at the beginning and the end, you would have that growth curve too, also to look at. The last thing on your chart in analytics is the real time. Now, I can't really show you any great data on real time because it's summer and we have no kids that are in there. This is what you should turn on every time your class is in IXL, because it's going to tell you, if you know you have 19 little bodies in your room, well, you better have a total students of 19 on IXL. This is a great way to track if they're working and if they're not working. And guess what? If they click from tab to tab, every time they click to the tab that's what they're not supposed to be doing, your count is going to change. It's going to show you if you have any students in idle. That's your idle students, the ones that are jumping around. The big red flag, and the one I use the most, is students that may need help. You either have a kid who's legit struggling and keeps getting questions wrong, or probably this is more common, you have B, the student who does not care, who is answering whatever he wants to try to get done. This is going to tell you in real time how those kids are doing. It's also going to tell you in real time the skills they're practicing on. I had a joker one year who every time I'd tell him to go to 4th grade math went to pre-K. Guess what? I could pull up my real-time center and tell you exactly what the whole class was working on. And it was really easy for me to tell if they were on grade level working or if they were doing something they weren't supposed to do. And then it also tells you the questions that they practiced in the past hour. This is your student activity wall. When your students are logged in, this is flooded with data to show you what the individual students are doing. You have the option to group it by skill or not by skill, and that just depends on how you assigned it in your classroom. This right here is huge because this is a great way for you to monitor them as they're going and catch those flags of the kids who need help or the kids who aren't doing what they're supposed to before it gets out of hand. The last tab in IXL is inspiration. And I'm not even going to lie, I have not gotten into this as much as I possibly need to, but I want you to know that there is so much information in this inspiration tab for you. My favorite thing that I used when I was in here was I used the professional development services a little bit if I kind of wanted to learn if IXL was changing in any ways, but I use these printables so often because they have stuff that's already created in IXL for you. They have your parent handouts. They have your, I loved charts on the walls that monitored growth. That's the math teacher in me, so I loved those. They have school breakout strategies. They have a bunch of different things in here that they've already created for you that you could print out and use. That makes your life a whole lot easier because it's something you're not having to reinvent the wheel on. So I want you to know that there's a bunch of printable resources here for you. There's a flood of information in e-learning. It kind of tells you exactly what I'm telling you, except for it's even more in detail than you could ever possibly imagine. So if I didn't answer a question, there's a really good chance that one of these could answer it for you. I went in here to figure out what the SMART score meant. I didn't know what that meant. IXL Live, it says will return in fall 2019. I don't have a whole lot of detail about that, but I know that we got emails about it being live to see how all the kids could kind of participate together. Your PD services is going to be really similar to your e-learning. Your IXL alignment. Now, I can thank, there it is, Envision, Miss Callie Strickland for showing this to me. If we, and I know right now for the younger grades, we have Envision Math. I'm not so certain about middle school. Find your textbook before you even begin and click on it. I'm going to show you because I think it's just fabulous. Click on this because it shows you how it aligns with your curriculum as it's slowly scrolling. It tells you what lessons correspond with each letter, and it is fabulous. I'm going to hurry because I'm running out of time. And you have a whole lot of webinars, summer case studies, research, Elite 100. There's a million things in IXL. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will do my best to help you, or fill out the Google form below, and I will get your question and respond as soon as possible. Thanks.